Well, I've been outside, I've done a sketch, taken a few colour notes. You can see on this sketch we have marked down things like raw sienna, that's for the light colour of the church tower. Over here, ultramarine blue and light red. That's just to show me that I want to throw that back, I want it to be blue. Dark green trees, we mark those in around the church. And then along the foreground here, I have mid-green, yellow, bright yellowish green. This is just so that I have colour notes. It's a very, very good idea if you want to do a sketch at a later stage, or turn a sketch into a painting at a later stage. Now, I've also taken a photograph. This is going to help me with the colour notes again, whenever I want to refer back to see what this was in the distance, or how far the trees came over. The more information you can gather, whenever you're out on location, the better. Now, you can see that on the sketch that I've done in the field, there's a lot more tonal values and tonal detail on the sketch. But what I'm going to do now is transfer that sketch onto the watercolour paper. So we'll get rid of the photograph and the sketch. And you can see that when we transfer that sketch on, all we want are the basic outlines of the sketch. We don't want any of that tonal detail. We'll put that on with the brush. So what I'm going to do now is mix up the washes for the big, broad Norfolk sky. And with the 3/4 inch flat brush, I'm starting here with the sunlit cloud, and I'm going to put in raw sienna and water only. The next colour is our cloud shadows, and that's going into the next tray. The whole secret is to have enough wash made up before you start. We want very dilute mixes for broad washes. We always leave a tray between the two washes so that if there's any overspill, it doesn't fall into the neighbouring wash. Make sure the brush is clean, because the slightest bit of darkness within the hairs of the brush will influence the light colour of the yellow. There we go. Lifting out lots of water. We don't take the excess paint off the brush. And I'm going up onto the watercolour paper. So there we go in that area. I don't want to go too close to the top, because you find these big cumulus clouds brushing across the sky just above the horizon. There we are, in circular motions, no uniformity to this whatsoever. And then along the horizon itself, we want to put in a bit of fading as the sky recedes. Next thing, straight into the cloud shadows, and we put a bit of shadow colour, and especially around the church tower, because that's where we're going to have that light against dark. The church tower being light, we want to show it against the darkness in the sky. There's some more clouds over on that side, using a bit of the ultramarine and crimson as well. Now, we're going into the blue sky, and this comes in from the top corners of the sky and the centre, and this is where we form the shape of the clouds. Coming across the top there, leaving space between the yellow and the blue, because if we mix yellow and blue, we get green, and we don't want any green in the sky whatsoever. So we're pulling that down to form cloud shapes. Pulling it down the side, and now we must blend this all together using in the same way that you'd make bread. You put in the ingredients, and then you get the food blender and mix it all together. So we want some big soft areas up there, leave some white flecks where we have those big white clouds, pulling down into the yellow. We're using that mixture of crimson and ultramarine, and this is where we soften it all. We want to have this darkness coming down here around the church, because that has to stand out light. We can soften that now and bring it down to the horizon line. As long as we keep it pretty light behind the areas that we want to have dark. I'm cutting around the church tower because it's light against dark, and softening that out towards the end. Now, I must work on this sky and blend it and soften it so that we have a nice soft sky, but still with lots of clouds up there. Now, while that's wet, we can continue to feed colour in. There's a big dark cloud pulling across, and that's painting away on its own. It's bleeding into the drying wash. We put another darkness here. This is Norfolk before a thunderstorm. Blending in some more of this very dark colour and some dark clouds in the distance. Now, just with the tissue, I'm going to take the excess water out of this wash along the bottom because we don't want that too dark at all. And we'll put a darkness up there as well, a bit more blue just to cool it slightly, but that's what we want. And then we can soften that out just by blending it into the blue colour that we have. That's beginning to look like a very, very stormy sky. Now, I've just finished painting the sky, and you can see it's very, very stormy. But this is a painting with not an awful lot of detail in it, so we must put a lot of emphasis into the sky. And we can start to put that wash on using downward strokes of the brush, because trees are growing upwards and we must do strokes that represent the way the trees are growing. Now, I've continued with that technique with the number 8 brush right along the paper to represent that bank of background trees. Now, if we look in this area here, there's a dark forest just peeping up over the top, and I've thickened up the mix slightly of ultramarine and light red, and now I'm going to set that in. You can see that it has a rather straight top, but at the same time I don't want to paint it with a straight line across the paper, so I'm just going to represent a broken, slightly broken top to mark in that bank of dark trees. And then we can tidy up the bottom, but the trees are growing up from underneath into that dark bank of trees, so we want to leave a slightly broken line. And then with the same brush and the same paint, we can put in this dark hedgerow along the front, using a broken outline and a very, very light touch on the paper. That comes about halfway across and continues on out to the left-hand side. And moving up, using the side of the brush, and I'm just going to dot in some of these trees. There we are. And they're going to make the church shine out against the dark background. There's another dark tree here to the right of the church, and I'm just going to fill that in. I love the way it hangs down there, and you can see in behind it and underneath it. So just filling in that with a very dark mixture of the green, and then we can put in some detail along the bottom, but leaving a broken edge, because the grass will never grow with a level top. And then to the left of the church, we just put in another tree overhanging there. And this area is all sitting a lot further forward than the dark backdrop of the trees. And what we've actually done is we've pushed the backdrop further back and we've pulled this forward. Now there's a bit of greenery here. I'll just reload the brush, and we put some bushes and trees in front of the church as well. And then tidying up along the bottom, there we are. And you've lots of foliage in the foreground as well in front of the church, and we just make that as rough as possible, leaving lots of little white bits, because we can put yellow over that and change the colour of the green. Now, we use the same technique to fill in the other bushes that go out to the left and the right of the church, and then we can move on to the next stage. Now, that's the middle distance in. Now what we have to do is put some texture and detail on the foreground, and it's not going to take a lot of detail, but just a bit of texture to give an effect. Now, this is a mixture of Windsor yellow and cerulean blue with a little bit of raw sienna into the mix. And if we want to pull that across, because you can see there's a bar runs across the field, and rough that up a little bit, just to show that there's texture and grass growing in there, and it gives a bit of interest added into this interest to this bland foreground. And that comes across. It helps to lead the eye into the painting as well. Into that I'm going to feed some darker mixture of Windsor yellow and ultramarine blue with a touch of light red. And while that previous wash is dry, I'm feeding in some of that darker colour along the bottom of the wash. There's a dark stripe running across there as well. A bit of darker green. And it's layers and layers of colour going further and further into the distance. Now, down towards the middle here, I want a thicker band of green. There we are, a big broad band. It doesn't have to be a continuous line. If you have some breaks in it, don't worry. It just adds to the texture and feeling of rough foreground. There's a few bits of plants as well, sweeping out to the side. Now, I want this pretty dark because as we come towards the bottom of the painting, we want to close off this end so that the eye doesn't lead off the paper. So sweeping across like that. Don't be afraid to put it on and put it on boldly. The last thing I have to do is put a bit of colour onto the church tower. Now that's a mixture, a very, very weak mixture of raw sienna and crimson. And we put that onto the church tower, just take away the white. And you see, the thing about sunlit stone, it should shine. And that's where you need a very weak solution. There we are. Now, a couple of birds. And we're just going to use a mixture of light red and ultramarine just to put a little bit of life into the painting. In this painting, I've tried to keep the composition simple but effective, with the use of an interesting sky and foreground. And just look how the little sunlit church leads your eye into the scene. Now, you don't need to have a lot of detail within a painting to make it pleasing to the eye. It's over to you. Practice your washes and your brush control, but keep it simple.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The extended DVD of today's workshop is now available from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.